Thank you, Melissa. This is a great honor. Let me say a couple of things. You know, I watch you do all the introductions and all that. And there's like, if you watch, or for those of us who've been around here for a while already, there's this whole new generation of leadership in our county that you see. You look at all the people running the clubs today, and they're not people who've been running clubs for 5 and 10 years. They're people who've been running clubs very, very recently. And it's just a pleasure to see. I mean, we have a core, a large core of the most extraordinary volunteers just anywhere. And you know, and the great thing when you're chairman is you get credit for all their work. So it works for me. I would say that you know, someday somebody wants to be chairman, my only advice is have a GPS in your car. Today my lunch was on State Route 7 in Boca. And as you know, I live in the Gardens, and here we are tonight. So it's been one of those days. Let me talk a little about Ralph, who I had the honor of hosting about 8 or 9 years ago. He was in the county, and we did a forum at one of the rooms off the Kravis Center with about 20 or 30 of us, and it was a Q&A, and it was all of that, and it was just wonderful. I mean, the guy's so extraordinary. A little humor first, and that is, you know, I made this riddle up. What do Ralph Reed and Marco Rubio have in common? The answer is they're both 25. The other answer, by the way, is they both have 4 kids. So let me talk a little about Ralph. For all of us who are good volunteers, meaning we give so much of ourselves without asking for, you know, any real stuff in return. This guy started as a freshman in college at the University of Georgia. By the time he was done with college, he wasn't only chairman of his college's Republican, he was one of the national college Republican chair people, however they did that structure, and he was just getting started. He went on, he was the first executive director of the Christian Coalition back when it was an emerging and a powerful force. And by the way, Virginia and John Brooks, Virginia's the current Christian Coalition leader in the county, and John, her husband, is the former. So there's a real closeness. Ralph went on, you're not going to believe this, he got a PhD in American history from Emory University. Who has time for this stuff? In the meantime, he forged a relationship with Jack Abramson and Norville, Grover Norquist. And Ralph was at the time a very young man with an extraordinary amount of influence in the conservative part of this country and throughout the Republican Party. In his own state, he then became, for a period of time, chairman of the Republican Party of the state of Georgia, where in the short couple of years that he did that, he had great success electing, I believe, a governor and a U.S. senator, both of whom were underdogs. He himself ran unsuccessfully for lieutenant governor in his state. In our state, we don't run for lieutenant governor, you run with the governor. In their state, you run all by itself. So he's got all of that. Now he has a Faith and Family Coalition. But the amazing thing is, you know, I'm one of these people. You guys have heard me speak 100 times. You never hear me speak about religion. So I'll say something just briefly, and that is, you know, I have in my mind this thought that many of us do. Is like, okay, why did God put us here? You know, and you do various activities, you've had various successes in your life, but you figure you haven't quite found the answer yet, all right? So I don't know the answer, but here's what I'm thinking about Ralph, who's done all of this stuff already that humbles the rest of us. Is that 2 months ago, Janine said, Ralph Reed's going to come to my club. And I'm like, wow, put me down and put it right on my calendar. 2 months later, we're in the middle of a presidential election and have, maybe for the first time in the history of our country, a direct assault on freedom of religion in a way that has never happened before. We've had things to fight about. We have never had basically what goes back, I think, to the Holy Roman Empire, when the question was, who was in charge, Charlemagne or the Pope, you see? And it's kind of where we are now, that apparently all religious law is subject to the president, who can then decide which religious teachings you don't have to follow. And you know, for most of us, who I politely refer to myself as your basic heathen, so the issue isn't, you know, how much of what the rabbi says do I do? Because believe me, the answer is extremely a small amount. The issue is, he's my rabbi and I get to disagree with what I want, you see. And all of a sudden the president says that's not true. And he says it, and this gentleman already has his organization with his 4,000 members just here in Palm Beach County, with national whatevers, waiting for, in my opinion, for this organization to show itself and evolve into not a Christian organization, a multi-faith organization that represents the basic fundamental right to practice or not practice your religion as you see fit without the government interfering. And this is it. Yeah, this is it. And I'll just finish with this. When I spoke at the Pundits on Monday, which is a secret group that nobody knows about, but they had 180 people for me. And I spoke about presidential politics. And like I said, I've never spoken about religion before, but religion has entered the presidential race in a meaningful way. So I made two comments. And my first was that we're all Catholics now. Meaning that the assault on Catholicism is the assault on all. And the second one, which I then had to explain, was they always come for the Jews first. And the reason I said that is because last summer the city of San Francisco, by the vote of their city council, banned circumcision. And they did it. They did it for the express purpose of expressing their anti-Semitism. It wasn't for health. It wasn't for any of those other things, you see. So we, you know, we're always sensitive to that because of our history. But now it's a national issue, and we have an opportunity to make all Americans involved, not because they agree or disagree on a particular teaching of any church, but that they fundamentally understand that if you give up the rights of your church to the government, you never get them back, and you're never the same person or the same country. All of that, I have no idea what Ralph is going to talk about, but I know I can't wait. Everybody, Ralph Luder.
Sid, I'd like to know what you really think. By the way, Sid, I have the answer. So we'll talk later. But Sid, thanks for all you do for Palm Beach County. I really mean that. I had the great privilege of working with Sid and his team in 2004 when I chaired the Bush campaign in the southeastern United States, which after the Democrats nominated John Kerry meant Florida, because the rest of the South was gone. When I was first given the position, you know, they would send me to Arkansas, they'd send me to Louisiana, maybe a little bit North Carolina, but once they nominated John Kerry, that was it. I pretty much camped out in Florida. You may remember we had a little close election here in 2000, and we were like generals refighting the last war, and we had the Chads and all that kind of thing. So Sid and I became friends during that period, and I want to thank all of you here in Palm Beach County, but also by association, the great people of Florida for not only re-electing George W. Bush in 2004, and not only giving not just this state, but I think the nation, one of the greatest leaders and one of the finest public servants in America today in Marco Rubio. And I came down here in June of 2009. I was in Orlando, and I was asked to speak to the Conservative Republican Women's Club. They were having their state convention, and it was Marco Rubio at breakfast, me at lunch, and Dick Morris at dinner. So it was kind of a moderate kind of a deal, moderate to liberal line of speakers. And I don't normally get up at 7 a.m. to hear somebody else speak when I landed at 11 o'clock and probably changed planes twice that day. But Dennis Baxley, I don't know if anybody in the room knows Dennis. Good, I'm so glad to hear that. He's a dear friend of mine. He was on the board of the Christian Coalition for many years here in Florida. He was actually chairman for a while. I've known Dennis for a long time. And he was, I think, Speaker Pro Tem under Marco when Marco was Speaker. I think that's right. And I believe he was Marco's roommate. And he sent me an email and said, hey, I saw you're going to be speaking. You really need to get up and hear this guy speak. And so I did. I got up at 7 a.m. and I came down, and it was a room about this size. And it was a crowd about this size. And I'm sitting in the back of the room. And I've been doing this for 30 years. I mean, I can walk into a state legislative chamber and I can go, him, her, him. And in 10 years, those three will go statewide. I mean, you just know. I mean, if you've been breeding horses for 30 years, you can walk into a stable and you can go, that one. And I sat in the back of that room, and at that moment, Charlie Crist had what, $6 or $9 million? He had the entire Republican establishment behind him. Every special interest in this state was shoveling money at him. He was ahead in the polls by probably 30 points. I think Marco had 40 points. I think Marco had $300,000 or something, and I sat in the back of the room and I listened to him. And I was so grateful to Dennis Baxley, because I went home and I told my wife Joanne, I said, we're going to match to this guy. And I said, and the only thing that's he is one of the most impressive individuals I have ever seen in all my years in politics. And I said, it's just too bad this guy doesn't have a snowball's chance of winning this race. But that's what people are hungering for. They're sick and tired of the pollsters and the entrenched interests and the powerful telling them who to be for. They want authenticity. They're willing to back somebody that all the so-called smart people say can't win if they share their values and if they have the moral courage to speak out and aren't afraid to endure what Shakespeare called the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that come with standing up for what's right. I want to thank Melissa and Tammy and Janine for all their great work. Appreciate all you guys are doing here in Palm Beach County. Janine called me up and she said, Ralph, do you believe in free speech? And I said, yes, I do. And she said, well, will you come to Palm Beach and give a free speech? If you can schedule it in January or February, I might show up. I don't know if you guys know it or not, but I grew up in Miami, and my parents both grew up in Miami. My parents grew up in Miami in the 30s and 40s. They actually went to high school with Bob Graham. He was 1 year ahead of them, so they're Stingarees. And I guess my sister went to Palmetto. I would have gone to Southridge if we had stayed. And I still have season tickets to the Miami Dolphins, I'm embarrassed to say. I'm a huge Dolphin fan. We were here when they won the Super Bowls. And so my parents grew up here. My family on both sides are from South Florida. And I really love this state. And I appreciate all that you've done and the national leaders that you've helped propel to the highest levels of the national civic conversation. I think the finest governor in America in either party in the last decade was Jeb Bush. I think he did an amazing job. And I don't think we've heard the last of him yet. But right now, I know I'm preaching to the choir, so to speak, but I really wanted to come here tonight as a friend and somebody who has labored in the vineyards with you and sweated and toiled and prayed and bled in many battles with the conservatives in this state over a long period of time, and really challenge you that as many great things as you've done in this state, and as many people as you've helped elect, like Jeb and Marco and Alan West, and I know there will be more, the eyes of America will be on Florida again in 2012. Because it is absolutely critical that we carry this state for whoever the eventual Republican nominee is, because I believe there is no way to defeat Barack Obama. I don't see any scenario that Obama can be defeated without carrying Florida. Absolutely. And I think if you do your job in Florida, and not just you, but we at Faith and Freedom Coalition, which is my grassroots public policy organization, will be working very closely with you, and I'll talk a little bit about that and what our plans are. You know, one of the interesting trivia, fun facts to know and tell is that from the founding of the Democratic Party in the early 19th century through 2008, no Democrat has ever been elected president from the time of Andrew Jackson until today without carrying at least 3 southern states. And because if you do the math, it's just very difficult. If you get blanked in the South, in 2000, when I worked on the first Bush campaign, the 14 states of the South, which are the states of the 11 states of the Old South, plus Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Kentucky, those 14 states in 2000 had 163 electoral votes. Because of the population growth and the movement, the demographic movement from the Snow Belt and Rust Belt to the Sun Belt, and because states like Texas and Tennessee and Florida don't have an income tax, and by the way, we're going to keep it that way. Because of that, by 2004, after the reapportionment, those 14 states had 173 electoral votes. As a result of the reapportionment that we've just gone through in 2011, those states will have 180 electoral votes. So if Barack Obama comes out of the South, including Florida, with your, what, 29 electoral votes? 29 electoral votes, okay? Keep in mind that whoever the eventual Republican nominee is needs 90 electoral votes more than John McCain got. That's the magic number. So if that nominee wins Florida's 29, North Carolina's 15, and I think Virginia's 14, I think it's 14, then you know you can do the math. That's 2/3 of what you need. That's 59 or 60 of the 90. In order to win, coming out of the South, down 180 electoral votes, Barack Obama would have to carry 77% of all the remaining electoral votes in the rest of the country. It's never been done in American history. So even though everybody talks about all the states, and of course Ohio is critical, but here's another interesting fact. I was in Tampa on election night 2004. I was pre-positioned, as were other people in every major county in the state, in case we had a repeat of 2000. Fortunately, thanks to your hard work, we didn't have that problem. And we knew by 9 o'clock we were going to win Florida, even though the networks wouldn't announce it for a while. But you may remember, we had to stay up late to see what happened in Ohio. Now, I knew by 11 o'clock that we were going to win Ohio because I was in touch with our team out there, and we knew we were going to be fine. But you may remember that Kerry wouldn't concede. Right. And I don't know if you know it or not, but to this day, CBS News has never called the 2004 election. I'm not kidding, that's literally true. They just never called it. You know, they didn't like the outcome, so they just never called it. So our victory party, you know, in Tampa got truncated. I just came down and said a few words. We didn't really get to celebrate till the next day. But because of the fact that Ohio has lost 2 seats, and Florida has gained 2, and Georgia gained 1, and Texas gained 4, and North Carolina gained 1, and I could go on. If you give Barack Obama the carry map plus Ohio, he still loses. Still loses. Now, I'm not prepared to concede Ohio. We're going to go up there and we're going to fight like cats and dogs, but I'm just telling you how significant what you do, and also by association North Carolina and Virginia does, because I really believe if we can carry a solid South, and we darn sure ought to be able to, given this administration's abysmal record, I genuinely don't think he can be reelected. And let me tell you, they know it. They know it. I don't know what's going on here in Florida. I'd like to, Sid, maybe you can give me some intel, but in North Carolina right now, which he carried by 14,000 votes 4 years ago, they already have